Hey dudes, how's it going? Just woke up from a nap here and I've got a swollen elbow thanks to the seasons in my autoimmune disorder, but welcome to how intense I've had to be. And today's video is just an update on that whole 3-month grind from the last video I mentioned. There'll be a lot of edits here because there's just so much going on in my mind. I had to write this out and just kind of explain everything that's going on. So first off, we have a little preview of like something that I've been pushing like during my free time and available and just working four ends of the candle essentially. This is probably, like I said, it's the most intense thing I've probably ever done. And more so, and just like with all the inspirational people I've come across that helped me unlock like the potential within myself, and also just credit to myself for actually just doing it too, because it won't become real without me doing it. Yeah, so like this video is basically like what I've gone through so far and what will come about as I move forward and what we'll see later on. Alright, so I'm also talking a little funny because there's like canker sores on my tongue thanks to health. And yeah, so I might be speaking a little strange or a bit slower or something different than usual, or if I'm just kind of like clenching my teeth because it kind of hurts to talk. But I'm gonna try and get my the best way through this as possible in as short as time frame as possible, but there's a lot to go through. So first off, I'm designing a character from the scratch and ground up, just bringing it through from A to Z process, as well as I created a basic like vanilla sword asset that I did on stream just to bring it through the pipeline to make sure I can land it into what I need and what I want. I did that. It worked out. It was just a vanilla sword, not something like crazily detailed. It was just like a medieval based sword. And using like every tools available as well as like pre-existing knowledge in the past to get there. But there's a lot of new things as well here that are completely unfamiliar to me. While I do have like pre-knowledge and existence of like previous platforms and technology, one of the greatest challenges here is actually transitioning over to completely new software that I've never used or never been familiar with. Only concepts in like certain things that translate across, sort of like, it's sort of like the same adage of people saying like, you know, the tools just help the artist, but they don't make the artist. The artist is still requiring like skill and all these other things. So one of the other things is like just developing this character. There's a lot of challenges involved, just even the design and the coherent design and all the themes relating around it and what I want to see at the end for myself. Not really going to spoil too much because I just want it to be kind of like, you know, impactful when it hits that release. But, you know, there will be visual progress and updates throughout. And I think like some of the hardest challenges is going to be the costume design. As well as like the hair. The hair is going to be very, very like intimidating and very, very challenging for what I want, as well as like where I want it to land. It's not going to be a filmic asset, and it's also going to be a game asset, but it also wants to be like a filmic asset. So it's very, very difficult to get both of these worlds in terms of 3D creation. Usually when you're building for film and TV, there's not really like a limit. The sky is like limitless essentially. There is no ceiling for optimization. All these things get thrown out the window because you're rendering each frame shot by shot, like frames per second, right? So if you're looking on the big screen, usually it's like 24 frames per second, and then you need to render out like 24 images for 1 second of footage essentially. So if you do like a movie that's like an hour or something like an animated film, all of that like can go like through the roof in terms of like optimization limits and whatever or anything. Like it completely is disregarded when you're creating in that sense. All that matters is that your visual looks hella fucking good. Everything's cranked to the max, all the sliders and everything goes all the way up there. But if I want something more like towards like references and things that I've looked throughout my life is like Final Fantasy and like other like top end AAA games is where I'm aiming at. Obviously I'm a single individual. It's a little insane to compare and aim that high, but you know, that's where I've always been aiming at, and it's always what I've wanted, and it's what I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna try and do my best to get there anyways. Regardless, and I'm very confident I can probably walk that road. It'll just take some time now rather than exploring and being lost for a long time, and just really exercise like the talents and knowledge and really give myself more confidence, which is what was instilled to me by a lot of people that I've met lately and conversed with lately, and just now doing it. Oh, so one of the other things is like game assets. So if I'm making a game asset and I want it to also be sort of like cinematic ready, there's this very, very difficult fine line in the middle where it has to be optimized and ready for playable and interactable, and then as well as it being optimized as pretty enough to look like it's also ready for film and scenes or whatever. This is a very, very hard balance to achieve. Most people do not do one or the other. I mean, they do not do both. They either do one or the other. They never really build for both. Which is why it's incredibly difficult, because when you're doing optimization, you need to think about performance. It's like an interactable asset, right? It's not somebody just sitting there and watching and receiving content. They also get to play with the content. So it's very, very difficult to get that medium balance, and it's something that's considered throughout all the way through from the very beginning of the design, building, and everything. So that's what's going through my mind essentially almost 24/7 now at this point. That's pretty much what's in my headspace, rent-free, like total 24/7, like 7 days a week since, I don't know, since like March or like years back, but like now I'm actively engaged in it too. So it's a long time coming, like even playing games throughout the years that you've seen me play the games. As much as I'm memeing and having fun and all those other things, these thoughts are always constantly flowing through my head. And like references come through all forms of games. It's like, it's not just like within like one category. Even Dota 2 MOBA games, Dota 2, we've got like Blade and Soul, we've got like mobile games like Artery Gear or like Punishing Grey Raven, Vindictus. We have all sorts of games that are flowing through in terms of like some form of reference, as well as like a bunch of artists as well that I'm going to share now and just go through this process before I go through the technology softwares. So one of the things is like the artists that like just like references and inspirations of like where I draw like ideas, or at least like power and like some form of like creativity well from, right, is famous artists like Kim Jung-ji. It doesn't even have to be artists, it could even be leaders. So for instance, the leader of FF14 is Naoki Yoshida, known as Yoshi P. He's a huge reference of mine. I really like his way of approach towards like consumers, players, and whatever. It's like something I take to heart. Is always looking out for the customer, trying to serve. Even the messaging is like the tiniest details matter to me a lot. So something like, his messaging to players is like, we hope you enjoy this. It's not so much like please like please understand or whatever. It's like he's asking the players in hopes that they enjoy it. It's like he's putting a risk out there in that what he created with his team is hopes that they will enjoy the content. Like they're trying to appeal to people. They're not telling the players to like understand their mindsets. He's trying to understand their mindset and deliver them an experience. That's something that gaming has always been very important to me, is that experience. And as well as like experiencing it with your friends, even though I was like mostly a loner most of my gaming life. And but like, just being able to talk about these things at later points in life with people who played the same game and just like converse about the different topics or things that like happened, funny moments, dumb moments, all those things. That was pretty important. And just like seeing like how he went through like, Bomberman, Hudson Soft, Final Fantasy, and then like finally rescuing Final Fantasy from the grave, nuking the entire world, building a cinematic, a story, all these other things, and just like hitting the Kokoro in the feels. And just like, that's pretty much like, Yoshi P is a really great leader example. Just reading his mind thoughts in like Famitsu or whatever was really, really inspiring. So he's like, he's a developer and game designer essentially, and lead director now at FF14. Very, very inspiring. Like look up as a role model to him essentially. Guys like Hyung Tae Kim, if I mispronounce the names, I'm sorry, but Korean artist that works on like Blade and Soul, now working on Project Eve. Yoshitaka Amano, the guy who's like in charge of like almost all the concept art of like Final Fantasy since like the beginning kind of deal. Stanley Art Germ Lao, I have like a statue of Marana, clearly like 3D printed and made by him, that's limited around the world. So I thought like I have some of his art books as well. I have tons of art books from everybody. Yume also like designed like some cat earphones, but then I discovered her through that, and it's just like, oh, it's like she's got nice art. Jundi as well, Jyunde. I'll put the names like all up on the side here essentially. And Asher Zhu from Epic Games, learned a lot of particles and like tech art from him. Very, very inspirational, as well as like he has like sort of like a bit of an open forum to seeking help. Actually very careful about asking him like specific questions, because I don't want to waste like my chances or his time. So it's very, very like specific or like a complicated issue that it's like trying to be as descriptive as possible. It's like going to the doctor and describing the symptoms, and he's an expert that knows how to solve your solutions. So, but then I assume he's like hella busy anyways and just developing. I've seen some of his stuff. He did like Matrix City examples with Unreal Engine 5, and it was really, really cool to see. Atsushi Suganuma, he was the FF15 audio director. He had a lot of inspiring like statements about like how audio, sound, visual stuff should be like designed and the process in which they did it. It was sort of like, here's your scene, and then here is like the movements of the characters and players and the environment. And then he was like, okay, so first we add dialogue, then we add sound with like Foley artists or whatever. So the soldiers you see marching in FF15 in one of the scenes, it was actually created like they're marching like feet noise, like knight clanking armor on the floor. It was created with actually some dude with a pair of like metal gauntlets, essentially shaking it in sync over a microphone to replicate that noise for the crowd of like knights walking essentially in that scene. And I was like, this is very interesting and out of the box like solution to replicate the effect that you expect in the game. As well as like after the dialogue and the sounds are in, then the music is finally added in at the end. Which brings me back to music. So Hideki Naganuma is also inspiration as well from Jet Set Radio, just the vibe of like the songs and the atmosphere. A lot of this lyricless music is something I listen to throughout a lot of my life, because I don't listen to music with too much lyrics is because, one, as a gamer, listening to songs with no lyrics, usually the song itself speaks a language that is like an environment, an atmosphere, or an experience that has been gone through. So like going to battle, you feel the adrenaline rush from some of the tunes that I get from like Dota 2, or the party vibes from like, you know, Jet Set Radio, or just like, you know, crazy EDM beats that you might hear from like other games nowadays, or Vindictus soundtracks, Ragnarok Online, Tree of Savior, Project Eve, Tales Weaver, Granado Espada. They're all run by like, you know, a guy who did the Ragnarok tracks is Jinbei Park, is another inspiration and reference. He now goes under the moniker of Esti, and he's working on Project Eve, which another inspiration, Hyungtae Kim, is also working on. And it looks crazy. It's like some cybernetics girl like fighting aliens and weird tentacles and just slashing them apart. And I was like, okay, like this game looks sick. And they're also using Unreal Engine 4 or 5 to do that, so it looks crazy. And yeah, so that leads me back to like, you know, some of the Capital audio visual guys that have developed sounds and like just their thought process about it too, while I'm also building most of these things without sound, obviously, because that's later on in the process that I have to go about. But Nobuo Uematsu, very famous for all of Final Fantasy sounds, and then I believe Masayoshi Soken studied under him or studied with him, I don't really know, but he came into the play with like around like FF13 or like FF12 or something like that. And his tracks are also all in like FF14 and is super lit. Anybody who's played FF14 and understands the atmosphere between like, you know, Stormblood's like Worm's Tale or something like that, or Alexander Raids or whatever, those tracks are very like, you know, they're very unique, and they speak like of a certain feeling. There's like other sound artists as well, or sound effects artists that aren't as widely known, like Go Kinuya. I don't know if I pronounced his name right or wrong, but he worked on like the Limit Break sound. And there was like a small interview that I saw somewhere on the Square Enix official channels, I think. And he was saying like, you know, he's like, I worked on the Limit Break sound, and I didn't really actually get to see it put into the game until like, you know, like this guy was making a Limit Break sound without actually being able to see what kind of effect it produced on the screen. So he had to just go by imagination. And my god, like if you're playing FF14 and you do Limit Break on your with your party for the first time, that shit is super memorable. You can ask any FF14 player and they'll be like, yeah, the first time I Limit Break, I kind of fucking shit my pants, and it's like, whoa. And it's like a lot of people remember this noise, and like he was just like, it was like months later, he went home to his own apartment or whatever, played it, and saw his own work, the Limit Break noise going off, and, you know, performing the skill that was integrated in with the programmers, the visual artists, and everything put together, all in like that scene where you're running in a dungeon with your party, the 4-man or whatever, for the first time in the very low level areas, and he was just like, wow. He was like, I did a great job. And then some of the other concepts, like Masayoshi Soken is like, you know, he's like, I know I did a good job is when the players are not distracted by the music. And they don't really comment too much about it other than that it's like, oh, I really like this tune and it's like very memorable. He's like, but if they're like talking about like, you know, oh, it's too distracting to the scene, or like, oh, too like, you know, overwhelming to like what was happening in the effect, like this was like a lot of detail put into the experience. He was just like thinking about like, you know, the emotions that the player might be feeling and through the story. Like he has to know the game story itself. That's a lot of detail, and it really follows through because like story is like one of the huge things, and the atmosphere too. He was just like, yeah, I want people to feel this way or whatever. He's like, Heaven's Ward had a lot of dark themes or whatever and all these things. It was very interesting to like know this kind of mindset. And he was like, yeah, he's like, I know a good job is when the player does not talk about the sound. But you know, that it's true though, because you don't want the sound to overwhelm the visual like experience as well. You only want to add to it and support it all, like the whole thing upwards. So these are all the like references and inspirations that I've taken into account with my journey here, or for a long time anyways. So I'm going to talk about like the softwares before I go into the people who've helped me unlock like potential within myself. The softwares that I was familiar with in the past, and it's actually still on this YouTube channel very like many years back, where I was actually doing minor game development, developing a very huge character as well. I'm actually going to redesign that older character to be this character's sister character anyways, and that story in my head still hasn't really changed. It's more or less been refined better now to be more realistic in scope, even though it seems kind of insane still. But now I actually see like the path and the bridges that I can cross to actually get there. So I used to be very familiar with Autodesk Maya, but nowadays it's like I haven't done that for so long because of there's like a gaming gap, health, and like IRL stuff all the way in between up till now, and it's like Blender is now being introduced into it. So I'm sort of transitioning between like Maya and Blender and both of them essentially, but I'm moving more into Blender. Same with ZBrush. I was also familiar with ZBrush, but I do like Blender's flows a bit better. But don't get me wrong, like I do work with a senior character artist who's actually very familiar with both Maya and ZBrush, and they are the industry standards. They're like the top end softwares, but Blender is just like, I'm trying to just see like how fast I can pick up, as well as like a transitional like learning curve to all of this, because again, it's like I'm familiar with two softwares I could actually be doing this all on, but then I'm now like reapproaching this entire new like technology gap into Blender and like all these other softwares that I have no clues about. Like even Substance Painter and Designer, I have no idea about any of those. I used to bake out normal maps and like all the AL maps and everything like the super old school traditional way. UVing still seems to be mostly the same, but there's a lot more like smart ways and like auto ways to do it. But like even the old manual concept is still the very most accurate way of making very powerful UV sets, which I found out is still incredibly important today, which I'm glad has transitioned and not lost in time. But there's a lot of things that I have to go through, so I'm just going to go through like the transitional things that I need to learn in Blender. So in Blender, the things I have to learn all the way from scratch essentially is all the hotkeys, shortcuts, workflows, default plating. Default plating is what I call like, you know, being able to work my skill set into a super default sense so that it can be translated to any workspace that's not customized like by my own PC. So that's one of the reasons why I always work towards software defaults, is so that it's like if I have to like work on a different PC, all my skills are transferable there, and I'm not like relying on plugins or like millions of plugins or add-ons or quick hotkeys that I may or may not have had or forgotten on my main PC or whatever, or wherever I'm like situated at centrally. So that's one of the things with default plating. And then so the things I need to relearn was pretty much modeling, sculpting, UVing, rigging, animation, Groom, texturing, baking, Geo Nodes. It was just like, and also like just workflows, general practices of what needs to be there and what shouldn't be missing, shouldn't be cutting corners, trying to optimize and aim for the best practices, creating proper assets, how to check and refine proper assets, clean up, topology, retopology, targets. So all these things are required for my sake of quality and what I need to see out of myself. And as well as simultaneously also learning the Unreal Engine 5. So there's the UE5 branch of Niagara, blueprints, animation blueprints, nanite, metahuman, constructor, editor utility, editor scripting, material shader, dynamic parameters, logic interface, data tables, structure, performance culling, optimization, modeling tools, landscape tools, foliage tools, meta sounds, and source control. So, as well as organizational structure and just planning in general. And as well, Quixel for baking, texturing, Quixel Bridge, asset, mega scans, albedo, textures, metalness, roughness, specular, ambient occlusion, normal maps, curve maps, and whatever else I can't think of right now. In terms of delivering the final result, is looking towards from transitioning over to Premiere into DaVinci Resolve for color grading as well as video editing. Photoshop has been moved over to Clip Studio for my sake. I tried Affinity, I've tried Paint Tool Sign, so moving through that. In terms of programming, there's been scripting, my embedded language, Python and whatnot. Brushing that up, and have moved over into slightly like Google scripts for data structuring, and a lot of Google Sheets, Excel sheets, Power Query. And then for Unreal as well, it's visual scripting, logic paths, and nodes, which is kind of similar to a lot of the node structures in like geometry nodes and Blender and other things. Programming knowledge goes from Objective-C into C++ to C# and JavaScript, Visual Studio Code, and then learning to write custom shaders for Unreal, which is what I'm also learning in. And that's a lot. So now I'm going to talk about like the unlockers in my life. So these unlockers are pretty much the people who given me and instilled in me a lot of courage, a lot of inspiration, a lot of self-confidence, and just like recognizing like potential that I want to see sharpened, and they just pretty much help put me there. It's also what I call like great friends. So like artists. So one is actually Sander Smith. If he sees this, he'll see it one day maybe. His ArtStation links is right here. I worked with this man. He is an absolute rock star, and that was my first impression from the very first conversation I've had with him. And we also have sort of like a similar intensity towards like seeing the most hardcore stuff out of ourselves, as well as like how deep and how like intense we want to see some of our arts come to reality. He works in mostly like film and like Hollywood kind of stuff, which is really cool. It was a great opportunity to meet with him, talk with him, inspire him actually even as well from time to time, and also like just validate and check each other's work, and just really like just really wanting to elevate like his level of work too. Like I wanted to see crazier stuff out of his end. And just like with everything I'm learning here, I also want to see you guys maybe get inspired in some sort of creative field to just bring your imagination to life, because that's exactly what I'm doing here, is bringing my imagination to life and probably giving you a story and experience or something later on down the road, because this is what I like about games. And hopefully build a game. Hopefully. That's a huge undertaking for a single person that's juggling 2 jobs and learning all of this at the same time. Another person is Alex Kolokowski. His ArtStation is here. I work very closely with this person, and we sort of collab and inspire each other with ideas a lot of the time. And we just kind of like slam out a lot of like weird different problems in terms of game development, strategies and solutions, as well as like just approaches to some ideas and things that I might stonewall in. But usually like I'm bouncing off of a lot of different people, and I'm just getting a lot of ideas and just like building up like some form of solution that just pops in my head when I'm collaborating with anybody really, and they don't even have to be an artist. And then another friend is Laura Rionde. She keeps me in check, going like, Kevin, have you worked on your project lately? And I'm like, yes, here's progress. So she's also like very inspirational as well. She sort of shares similar like mindset intensity as me, but like I've seen her work as well. She's also very creative and very she's a very interesting individual. So yeah, there's a lot of inspirational creativity from there. She's also like learning through Blender and geometry nodes as well at a hardcore rate, trying to solve like huge projects. Hoop Tall or Fractured Fantasy, I don't really know how to reference this guy, but like I think this dude is incredibly inspirational. I sort of found him when I was like looking through tutorials and trying to find things, and this man is a god. Hey, I don't know if you'll see this. He might. He commented in the last video, and I was like, oh shit, he discovered me. I'm a little shy, but yeah, this dude is like crazy. He's like, as far as I'm concerned, he has had like zero experience as well within like this department, and like I see his potential and learning curiosity go just like through like a hyperbolic curve, and he's probably gonna make something really insane. And I hope to be able to like assist or help him in any way possible, and just really like I don't know, I just hope that I have free time to like collab with him once I get past like all these things that I'm trying to get through right now on personal project, as well as like 2 jobs and my health being in check, and on top of like juggling all these other IRL things and all. It's like, this is just so much, and making like videos for you guys, trying to keep you up to date like with what's going on with this 3-month massive hardcore burn that I'm doing. Then there's Mao, Ram, and Guillermo from UNF Games. These guys are also like super good for like indie developers, as well as like teaching others. Their concepts have made a lot of sense. And also like things that were very understandable to me, who has pre-existing knowledge within this realm with that background education of game design and 3D art in the past. So just learning like these concepts, as well as like decoupling integrations and stuff inside Unreal and all these things, is incredibly helpful. Just trying to reverse or like back end dig into like older products and AAA titles to see how they did it is also very, very interesting to know. The concepts to approach and to basically save like thousands and thousands of hours like in the future, essentially, because if you build something in the wrong direction and without like much forethought or like consideration early on, you're gonna do a lot of rewind debugging, or you just have to start over and rinse repeat. So there is a lot of benefits to overthinking a little bit, but you also do not want to paralyze yourself by having choice paralysis or going down a stuck rabbit hole. You want to be able to prototype fast, iterate fast, and also see like your visual targets. That's why I like also rush my character through like towards like almost like what looks like almost an end target, but then now I'm rewinding all the way back because I've crossed all those bridges and I've seen my character in like some state or form near like the landing destination that I want to look at it. And basically I'm treating this like a video game myself too. So it's just like, this is the checkpoint. This is a save point here. I can now save progress. Now it's just like re-roll back and make different choices so I can see different endings and hopefully have a better ending here. So in my brain, I'm also treating this almost like a video game grind too, and trying to level up my skills and just leveling up. It's just incredibly harder. So that's pretty much what it is. And yeah, so like other people is like Adir is also like one of the fans as well that I'm now like working with. He's a very, very powerful Unreal programmer, but I'm trying to just build something with him as well, and we're just trying to make something cool. Asher Zoo giving me the few conceptual like approaches towards Niagara effects when I was a very, very new beginner. And also just trying to diagnose like his doppelganger code, as well as like what he provides in his blog or whatever for free to all users, because he's an Epic Games staff. It was incredibly helpful to at least like get an idea of like performance and like all these other things heading into it. Simon Toms from Blender, I met him at SIGGRAPH and had a very, very, very long chat with him. Very inspirational, and like he describes sort of like the difficulties of like what Blender has to face against like all the corporations and the huge like platforms trying to appeal to Blender and like take control of Blender essentially, even though Blender is like a community oriented like, you know, freeware. And like that's why I wanted to work with Blender, because I wanted to help bridge this gap a little bit, and that's what I told him as well at SIGGRAPH, and just try and enlarge this bridge to all creators essentially, so that people can engage in their imaginations a bit better and build, you know, stories or other things. Mark Brunet is another person that I'm learning from and unlocking from, bought lessons from him. He has a huge YouTube channel. He's got a lot going on. And just some of his concepts and the way he teaches things is very, very enjoyable. It's very, very, it's very engaging, and the way he sort of presents it is kind of fun, and just makes a lot of sense too, because he's also a senior expert in that area. He's worked in Blizzard for a long time in the past, and now he's just like providing like info sites, and also just accelerating people's like workflows to get their visuals out there faster, which is what I'm trying to do too once I get there, and also explaining like the process of what I'm going through currently. Chris Murphy from Epic Games is also very informative. All his tutorials and everything to do with Epic, Unreal, and all that is incredibly informative. He gives you a good stepping stone and starting point, and then usually those concepts can be mixed or advanced or complexified, where it generates more of a custom approach from yourself. So references and inspiration and resources, as well as also myself, just literally digging and going into massive rabbit holes late into the evening almost every single other day or every other day, and into like 2 or 3 in the morning. Right now it's 1 a.m. making this video, and a ton of art books, like so many art books. I probably spent thousands of dollars on art books, and they're just all over the place in my room. You just don't really see it because I'm boxed into this square here. But there's like a ton of art books. So like we're talking like fat art books like this thick. This is like the art of Eorzea essentially, and just like the process to like all how things were created, as well as commentaries from leads. We've got like FF like materia here. I've got like Dota 2 comic book like right in front. It's just all over the place. So you know, there's a lot of art books and materials, and yeah, also many various Instagram models. I just wanted to throw that in there. So there's just kind of like tons all over the place. So why not? And yeah, so just kind of exercising every tool available and using a little bit of Midjourney and AI art generation to help me get references and spawn references to my visual targets and getting to what I need faster. So AI art is actually very incredibly helpful for what I subscribe to. I'm using Midjourney and utilizing those visual target references that I'm generating and prompting for, because this is almost like no difference than like going through Google and just using like Lexica and searching AI art and Stable Diffusion art stuff just to quickly like gather reference and piece it together anyways into like a real concept that I want for myself, rather than subscribing to like fashion magazines and all these other things that are like you know, they're coherent designs or whatever, but it's not to the imagination that I want. Alright, so that's pretty much the end of this video. This was actually really long. I'm it's probably split up into 2 parts or something here because it's just so long. And yeah, so that's pretty much the process of everything that's been going on lately. And there's only going to be one of these, so I'm not going to make another like how intense I've been video. And this is it. So, but this is the progress that's been going so far. And I've been periodically trying to stream every Saturday regardless, even if it's like super late night, if I'm like procrastinated throughout the whole day. I'm just trying to like do something every Saturday. I'm hella scared or like embarrassed to some degree, because it's like I'm streaming literally me failing, being stuck, being a total noob. Like on 2 Saturdays ago, I was baking ambient occlusion in Blender, and I was stuck on this process for almost 3 hours. And the only problem, out of everything I searched online, the solution was actually moving my model outside of the cage, because I was baking previous like maps, like normal maps onto the model, and you know, I was caging the models. But then when I was doing ambient occlusion, my object, which was this sword that I built, thought it was inside something, so the map kept coming out as pure black and darkness, and I was like, this does not look like a proper AO map. And when I look at the world preview, it's clearly not pure black. It was like white with like shadows near like the edges and crevices and whatnot, which is a proper AO map, because it's basically it's like a vertex targeting map that shows you where lack of light is, but it's not really like supposed to be affected by lighting. It's just more or less like these are dark areas in like an object that are always dark, for instance. So like an example of ambient occlusion that you can easily see anywhere with you is your hand. So what you want to do is, like, if you look in between your hand, there's areas where it's always going to be like slightly dark regardless of the lighting, unless you have like 360 omnidirectional lighting just like burning straight into your hand, then yeah, it's going to disappear. But like just in natural, usual, like uniform lit lighting, there's areas that's always going to be dark, and you can visually see it very easily on your hands, because like, you know, you look at your hand, it's not flat, it's not like one color, there's bumps and whatever and whatnot. That's like a normal map. But then ambient occlusion is also like, you know, these are the areas that should be shining a little bit brighter, these areas should be shining a little bit darker, etc. That's basically what an AO map is for. It's like It's like what you would see with like low lighting anyways and whatnot. I'm not sure if this is fully correct, but that's to my understanding. I might have this a little bit wrong, but if not, I'm sure somebody will correct me in the comments below anyways, because everyone's a genius and I'm not. So yeah, so that's every Saturday is just me struggling, and it's like I'm very like a little bit apprehensive but I just told myself I'm just gonna do it anyways and just fail through. I'm just gonna fail 1,000 times because it's just like there's gotta be a success somewhere down the road. Like building the normal maps was super fast early on, and then just getting stuck into ambient occlusion for 3 hours into 2 or 3:30 in the morning was absolute depression. But I made it through. I learned how to clean up my model in that process, so there were successes and victories throughout the thing. And I eventually learned what the traumatizing experience was and how to fix and get a proper AO map out at the end, which was like the huge success. And there was like a bunch of other successes along the way is what I need to like recognize. Anyways, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.